Hey, so I had a few people from the last workshop that I was at ask if I had a video that explained how I used a jug stick. So this jug stick I got from Continental Clay. It's kind of hard to find on their website. Sorry for that, my dog's knocking stuff over. It's kind of hard to find on their website, but if you go underneath, I think it's trimming and throwing tools or something like that, you'll find native Minnesota wood tools. And so this is the jug stick that you'd find under there. I also have it linked on a couple different videos on my website. So I'm gonna show just a really simple textured mug and how I use this to belly that form out and expand the texture. Thanks. All right, so I've got 1.25 pounds of clay, which is I like using that size clay for mugs. These textured mugs I throw a little bit thicker than just like a standard mug. So I'm opening it up, I have a nice flat bottom. If you're wondering, I'm using standard 308 Brooklyn Red clay. All right, so I've got my green MKM rib, or my green Mud Tools rib, sorry. And to really exaggerate the texture, a lot of times I'll go through this and rib it one more time to actually make it a little more concave of a form. Sorry about the background noise, our puppy's playing with toys in the studio. He's probably gonna bump the camera too, so just a heads up. So for texture for this, I just took a yogurt lid and cut a texture into it. So that'll just start at the bottom, and I'm just pulling that texture up. You can stamp textures. This is how I do my faceted mugs. The possibilities are pretty endless. You can use those texture rollers or stamps or make your own custom texture tool. Whatever is gonna get you what you're looking for. I'm just gonna refine the rim just a little bit here. And I don't want to stretch my rim out any farther on these. And I've got these big hands here, so that's why I like using these. So I just dip it in my water, get the end of it a little bit wet. And now for your hand position, I take my left hand and brace it at 6 o'clock. I get 3 fingers in there usually, 2 or 3 fingers inside the mug. And then I'll show you a side view here. The throwing stick rests on these knuckles and I push away from me at about 11 o'clock. So I'm using my hand that's stabilizing it as a fulcrum and the jug stick as a lever. So I'm pushing away from me. A lot of times people, the first time they try to use these, they'll hold them like this and push out, or sideways, whatever way. And you can get there. Bigger pieces, I'll use this on the inside and rib on the outside like that. But it definitely takes a little more practice getting a steady hand at holding it like that. So this is a good way if you're just figuring out how to use one of these or want to try one to see how you can incorporate into your work. Holding it like this and then using it as a lever and pushing away from yourself is one really good way of doing that. So I'm going to get it down at the bottom, and you can see where I'm already pushing out, and I'm just slowly lifting up and applying nice, gentle, even pressure. So that's my first pass. You can start to see how that texture is expanding compared to the rim and the bottom. And I'm going to really belly this one out. And we can go a little farther because there's plenty of clay here. So I'm just kind of playing around with this to kind of show you how it works. But I'm starting at the bottom. You want to visualize where you want the widest part of your form. If you want it, mine's just above the waistline, I would say. And that's kind of where you want to aim for. If you're someone who's ever played a sport, like tennis or baseball or anything like that, it's kind of like your follow through. You push into where you want the curve, and then you lighten up and go all the way through. So I'm just gonna go from top back down to even a couple of little spots out on here. So that's kind of how you use one of these. This is just a big round orb, nothing fancy. But you should be able to get the idea. And I can show you what happens if you go too far. You'll notice the top starts to sag. See how far I can get this out. So you'll notice I'll come up to the rim again and I can get it wider. But eventually the middle will get too thin and one of two things will happen. Either the top will collapse down. You'll notice my left hand here is supporting it, so that doesn't happen. Or the whole thing will just kind of collapse in. Sometimes you can rip through the outside. We'll see how wide we can get this. Depending on your clay, you might be able to get pretty far with it. So this has almost got a flat top. So you can really see how this texture's changed. I haven't ripped through it yet. I made it nice and thick. It's pretty much paper thin on the outside. So you kind of get the idea there. The other common problem that people have is they want to do something to the rim, and so they'll get the outside and then they come back and want to play with the rim. And a lot of times what happens is this is so weak that you go to do something to the rim and it's just going to collapse on you. And you'll notice how that's falling apart. All right. So the next one, I'm going to show you how to avoid that problem. So again, I'm starting with a 1 1/4 pounds of clay. Open it up. I'm just going to make a simple little vase here, I guess. Like I said, I throw these a little wider. Or a little thicker, I should say, so I can put the texture in that I want in there. So now I'm going through, I'm not pulling clay so much as I'm making sure I'm a relatively even thickness the whole way through. And it's about maybe 1/4 of an inch thick, so they're pretty generous walls. Maybe 3/8 of an inch even. So I'm using my Green Mud Tools rib here to just clean off the outside, which just gives me a little neater texture. If you can, you know, if you're a beginner and you're someone who's like, golly, I always get so messy, sometimes it helps to have one of these big grout sponges. handy so you can keep your hands just a little bit cleaner while you work and you can see what's going on better. So again, I'm going to use this same tool. And this time, because I'm going to do something to the rim, I'm going to stop the texture. I'm just going to make a little mark with my fingernail. You guys can see that I've got a little bit left at the top. So I'm not going to put texture at the very, very top. You notice I'm also cleaning the tool off every time, and that's just giving me a little neater surface. I don't have to go back and clean up so much later. Otherwise you get all those little schnibblies of little clay boogers all over the place. And if I go over my line or a little bit under my line, I'm okay with that because I'm still going to throw over it a little bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to add just a little bit of water on the rim. I got my fingertips wet, but I don't want to add too much water where it starts running down a whole lot. But what I'm going to do now is I can start throwing the top of this piece. I'm going to really collar it in here pretty aggressively. Collaring, I'm holding my hands like this so I've got 6 points of contact. Then I'll throw it in. And always come back, kind of compress your rim a little bit, and that'll help keep it centered. And so this is allowing me to thin out the neck of this piece without ruining it later. And I'm gonna stop. I've got my neck about maybe 80% of the way to where I want it. I've done most of the throwing and gotten it quite a bit thinner. It's much thinner than what this suggests, and I'll leave some weight right in the actual rim so the pot has some more strength to it. So same sort of thing. I'm gonna take my jug stick, I'm putting it in, and you'll notice I've got this facing away from me. So it usually ends up pushing around 11 o'clock or so. And this time I can only fit maybe 2 fingers into the top. So that's what I'm gonna do. And similar thing, I've actually only got 1 finger in the top. So I'm gonna push starting at the bottom and slowly work my way out, thinking about where I want the waist of this piece to be. And I want it, you can see this pushing a little bit on the side right about here. That's about where I want the widest part of this pot to be, I think. And you'll notice my left elbow is firmly braced on my leg. The jug stick is braced on my left arm, or my left hand. And so I'm making as many points of contact as I can manage, so I've got a nice sturdy base. Now I'm just finishing up the very bottom here. And once I get up to the top, I'm going to go back through and try to smooth it out. All right, so now we've got this really plump, gorgeous form. There's the pun for the video, everybody. I know you're probably rolling on your floor laughing all over your studio. So now I'm going to come back and touch up my rim. I don't mind adding a little bit of water on the inside so I don't get friction and torque anything too far off to one direction. And one thing that can be pretty helpful tool at this point is to get a metal rib. Now, a lot of times the metal ribs that I use, when I use one, I've cut the end off, you can see at about a right angle. Sometimes if I have to rib something down at the bottom here, it lets me get into those corners a little bit better. I don't need it for this piece, so I'm gonna use the other end. But this metal rib's nice because I can get them at the angle that I want, so I can get a nice smooth curve up at the top. So it's nice and finished looking. So I could come back and add some little accent handles here. You could flip this over on a chuck and trim the bottom. For my bottom, I'm just gonna grab a wooden knife and just undercut it a little bit. Clean that up. This is a tool I got from Troy Bungard. He makes excellent handmade wooden ribs. Troy Bungard. At Burl Chaser on Etsy is his Etsy shop, Burl Chaser. He also makes brushes. So that's that. At this point, I typically would cut it right off the bat. Because the outside's relatively dry, I scraped all the slip off of it. I added my texture, which also scraped slip off. If I've got dry hands, which I pretty much do, I should be able to lift this right off my wheel head. You'll notice I didn't throw with a bat. I can lift this right off my wheel head. I'll give it a little twist when I do it, and then I can set it off to the side for later. So you can see that profile a little bit better. All right, so thanks a bunch for tuning in. Enjoy and have an excellent day. Good luck throwing. Stay dusty.